Right now on the Daily Debrief, the live-in girlfriend of R&B singer R. Kelly is speaking out against him for the first time as he faces sex crimes charges. Plus, no relief for serial podcast subject Adnan Syed as the nation's highest court refuses to hear his appeal. Also,
Jimmy Rogers and I physically did it, but Mark Sievers was also involved in the planning.
This co-defendant says a husband asked him to murder a wife. We look at the forensics and the cross-examination strategy. The Daily Debrief brings you the day in court. It's Monday, November 25th.
We begin tonight with the discovery of the suspected remains of the daughter of a UFC fighter. Anaya Blanchard disappeared October 23rd, and authorities are waiting for official confirmation that remains, which turned up 20 minutes east of Montgomery, Alabama, are hers. Abraham Yazid and Antoine Fisher are under arrest in the case. Fisher charged with disposing of evidence and providing transportation to Yazid. Yazid is charged with kidnapping Blanchard by forcing her into her own car. The U.S. Supreme Court will not hear the case made famous by the podcast Serial and an HBO documentary. Therefore, the conviction of Adnan Syed will stand. A jury convicted him of killing his former girlfriend, Hae Min Lee, in 1999. Syed's appeals attorneys attempted to convince the High Court that the Maryland Court of Appeals, which examined the case, misapplied the law. The Maryland High Court found that Syed's trial attorney was deficient, but that failing to call a possible alibi witness didn't seriously affect the outcome of the case to the point that Syed deserved a new trial. So the Maryland ruling now stands, and it's the end of the line for that defendant. Our guests now, Joseph McBride and Michael Bryant, both attorneys with me here in New York. So, Michael, here's the bottom line here. The defense goes to the U.S. Supreme Court and says the lower court, or the state court, I should say, which is still lower than the U.S. Supreme Court, is hypothesizing up ways that the state still could win if the defendant presented this alibi witness, and saying that's a misapplication of the law. The U.S. Supreme Court completely silent on the matter.
Yeah, you know, they really aren't going to dirty their hands with a case like this. I understand that one witness that wasn't called only covered a very small period of time, but those are factual issues and discussions. You know, the Supreme Court is looking for groundbreaking issues that will affect policy moving forward. They're not there just to retry cases.
Yeah, I mean, Joseph, so the people who are backing up Adnan Syed here are saying, wait a minute, if the lower court misapplied the law, the U.S. Supreme Court should step in and set things straight. Apparently, they didn't think the law needed to move along far enough in this case.
One would think that a misapplication of the law would be enough, but unfortunately, it's not here. It doesn't feel right in my gut. I've been following this story for a long time. It feels like there should be more. This doesn't feel just, but it is what it is.
And Michael, when you have a situation where the defendant is saying my attorney at trial completely screwed up, and the state high courts turn around and agree, oh yeah, the trial attorney messed up, but then to not step in and say it was enough to actually affect the outcome, a lot of people think that's dissonance.
You know, they're really saying a lot by saying nothing. You know, and I like the Sixth Amendment attempt to get the Supreme Court's ear, because that's what they need to do, is make it big like that. But the fact is, when the court looked at it, without saying so, is saying, yeah, but the ultimate issue is not so big.
Not a new issue. It's an issue that the High Court has indeed laid down the law on before, and then they expect the state courts and whatnot to follow along with it. So, Joseph, here's the next step. We have a trend in high-profile cases made famous by documentaries and whatnot, where celebrities will step in and try to exert political pressure for some kind of a pardon. Is that the tactic that you expect to see next in this one?
Absolutely. Otherwise, it's the end of the road. There are many reasons here for people to get involved. It does not feel just. I would anticipate a litany of celebrities to get involved in this case.
And that may be where we are headed next. No decision from the Supreme Court as well on whether it will or will not accept the case of Rodney Reed. Reed, of course, the Texas man on death row over the killing of Stacey Stites. The Innocence Project, along with a number of celebrities and politicians, have called for a thorough review of Reed's case after new witnesses have come forward. Some have asked to change their testimony, and other experts have questioned the science behind the conviction. The lower courts have taken up the matter, holding off the execution, which likely explains the Supreme Court's delay on the case. Now to developments over the weekend in the case of R&B singer R. Kelly. One of the girlfriends who long supported Kelly has come out in a series of internet articles which call Kelly abusive and controlling. Jocelyn Savage also said Kelly kept her, in her words, locked up like some damn animal. Savage's family says that she's finally becoming comfortable talking now that R. Kelly is in jail pending trial on sex charges in a number of jurisdictions. Kelly's defense attorney, Steve Greenberg, said that Savage is flipping now that, as he puts it, the money ran out. Now to the trial of a Florida man accused of killing his wife and business partner. Mark Sievers charged with being the ringleader behind the murder of Dr. Teresa Sievers. A colleague found Dr. Sievers beaten to death with a hammer in her own home. Husband Mark Sievers is the one on trial right now. Co-defendant Curtis Wright pleaded guilty and testified both against the husband and the co-defendant Jimmy Rogers. Rogers, the third co-defendant, in prison after a second-degree murder conviction. An employee who worked for Dr. Teresa Sievers testified that she could not get a hold of the doctor the day the doctor died and about her conversation with the victim's husband that day.
What time was her first visit scheduled for?
9 a.m.
And was it normal for Dr. Sievers to have visits scheduled at 9 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
And did she make those 9 a.m. visits or 9 a.m. Appointments?
Yes.
Did she make this 9 a.m. appointment on June 29th?
No, sir.
And was it normal for her to miss an appointment like that?
No, sir.
When she missed the appointment, what did you do?
I tried calling her.
And when you tried calling her, does she have like a cell phone or a house phone you were trying to call her on?
Cell phone.
Her cell phone? Did you get a hold of her on her cell phone?
No, sir.
When you were unable to make contact with Dr. Sievers, what did you do?
I called Mark Sievers.
And the same gentleman with the pink tie you identified earlier?
Yes, sir.
Were you able to get a hold of Mr. Sievers?
Via text.
And when you got a hold of him, did you tell him that Dr. Sievers hadn't arrived at work yet?
Correct.
And did he respond?
Yes.
And how did he respond?
Text.
And what was his response?
That he could not get a hold of Dr. Sievers either.
A former manager of co-defendant Jimmy Rogers testified about a pair of coveralls. The manager said Rogers wore that type of garment at work and that Rogers said he was in Florida at the time of the killing.
And are these suits required to be worn by employees?
Yes, sir, they are.
How do they get the suits?
Delran issues the suits as you come into or getting ready to go into the plant. There is a area where you can get clean uniforms to put on.
And how many, is there a daily allotment or a daily quota of suits that an employee can get?
No, sir.
Is there any other equipment in addition to the respirator that the employees would wear with the blue suits?
Latex gloves are worn underneath leather gloves. On occasion, some people will use duct tape to duct tape the sleeves and the pants legs of the uniforms down tight to make sure no contaminants actually go up inside the coveralls.
Now, while you were supervising Mr. Rogers at the Doe Run facility, did he ever inform you that he was taking a trip out of town?
Yes, sir, he did.
Where did he tell you he was going and for what purpose?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
He told me that he was going to Florida to visit his brother who had recently graduated law school, and they were going to celebrate the fact that he had graduated law school. This was the gentleman on the roofing crew that he was to meet that Monday morning to work with that crew. This is the text that Jimmy had sent me back saying I'm in Florida still.
A law enforcement witness said records from Walmart indicate that the defendants purchased some items which in hindsight seem very suspicious.
I did see some items that they were able to select, which was a t-shirt, and I knew that they picked some shoes, and I was able to obtain a receipt as well of the items that were purchased at that time.
What kind of t-shirt did they get?
There were two items of clothing that would be t-shirts. One at the time I went, which was months later, was already sold out. The other t-shirt was a red Budweiser t-shirt that was selected off the rack.
And what kind of shoes did they get?
There were a pair of water shoes that was also sold out at the time I went back. But there was a pair of black, what I would describe as work type shoes,
Any wet wipes or trash bags?
Yes, sir. They also selected trash bags, wet wipes, a black backpack. They selected a toolkit screwdriver set. There was approximately 8 items or so, 7 or 8 items.
Let's go back to our experts here, Michael Bryant, Joseph McBride. So, Joseph, when you add all those items up together, and then you listen to the fact that an alleged co-conspirator gets up on the stand and says, oh, I did this, and then these other guys were in it with me, it's just highly bizarre.
It's certainly bizarre. Feels like they're putting together a kill kit. You got the tools for a murder there. You got the tools for travel there. You have the overalls. You have the duct tape. Looks like they're going to do a job.
Michael Bryant, I expect you to purchase every single one of those items to come in here because you've got those props, you've got the hammer, you're trying to explain everything here. So where's the Budweiser t-shirt?
I do not have that. I'm working on the gloves and the tape, though, yes. And I have to say I'm very impressed with Walmart's conviction rate because if you go into Walmart, there's a good chance it's going to come back to bite you if you're a criminal.
Well, look, I mean, you know, the bottom line here is that you've got strong testimony from someone who admitted guilt, and then authorities are saying, well, we're not just going to put him up there for everybody to believe. We're going to put all of this other evidence in to back up the story that this is the way it happened. So you've got a confession, and then you have corroboration, and the prosecution saying, jury, this is enough. Is it enough, Michael Bryant?
Yeah, I think it's enough to get you near a conviction. I don't think they're there yet. I don't think they've drawn the connection with Sievers and Rogers and Wright. It's not quite there yet.
So, Michael Bryant, do you think that we need to have more of a connection here? Joseph, you've got the co-conspirator on the stand saying there's a connection. You've got the voicemails. You've got these colleagues saying there were phone calls. I'm calling the husband. The husband's calling me, and that's bizarre because he's calling me to let me know what the whereabouts of the victim are, and he never really did that, but he did it right before the killing. Is all of that going to add up here?
It's right there. It's right by the line. Is it overwhelming? Is it beyond a reasonable doubt? I don't know yet. I feel like we're missing one little crucial segment that kind of links everything together.
And of course, we still have time to go in this case, Michael Bryant. If we don't go that next step that both of you seem to be unanimous in thinking that we need, does the defense get up there and turn around and say, well, you know, look, they connected the two people who were convicted and admitted guilt, but not the third guy, not the husband?
Yeah, I think the jury wants to find Mark Sievers guilty. It's a horrendous crime. They know it happened. They want to see that last little nugget, and we'll see if the prosecution comes up with it.
And still ahead tonight here on The Debrief, we're going to stick with the trial of Mark Sievers after the break. Our attention, however, turns to cross-examination. Is the defense raising reasonable doubt, or is the defense spinning its wheels? We're going to look now at the defense's attempts, many of them futile, to make a case in the trial of Mark Sievers. Co-defendant Curtis Wright testified to honor a plea deal that his former longtime friend, Mark Sievers, asked him to kill Dr. Sievers. On cross, the defense asked whether Wright asked his neighbors to lie about his whereabouts around the time of the killing. Ask yourself whether this helps or hurts the case against the husband, Mark Sievers.
Asked your neighbors to lie for you?
No.
How did you get your neighbors then to sign these false affidavits?
Everything that was in those affidavits was true except for the 24-hour time discrepancy.
Okay.
And this was weeks after it happened, so I suggested that week and was the time. And
so basically what you did is you picked a set of events that was kind of memorable, specifically about working on a little mini truck, correct?
yes.
And then you just suggested to your neighbors that it was on days that it really wasn't. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was the day before.
You manipulated 4 of your neighbors into providing false testimony.
Yes.
And you did this because at the time you thought it was going to benefit you, correct?
I was protecting me, Mark, and Jimmy.
We're also going to review the cross-examination of another key witness, the doctor who found the victim's body. First, however, his dramatic retelling of that gruesome discovery.
Well, as I was walking into the house, I would say as I'm stepping into the step leading into the laundry room, which leads into the house, I was calling her name.
And did you get an answer?
There was no answer. No.
So did you get a chance to get into the house and try to figure out where she was?
After I took a couple of steps into the house, it was obvious where she was.
And why was it obvious?
She was dead on the floor in the kitchen.
You were able to see her?
Yes, I was.
Can you tell me how you were able to figure out at that point that Dr. Sievers was dead?
Well, there was a lot of blood on the floor in the kitchen, a big puddle around her body, and she had this massive head wound in the back of her head, and she was cold and lifeless.
And so you touched her body?
Yes, I did.
What was the purpose of touching her body?
To check for any signs of life.
On cross, the defense asked that colleague why he never brought up voicemails the defendant left for him to tell him about the victim's plans. The defense tried to ask a few too many questions here and tried to ask them the wrong way.
The date of your first deposition was in February of 2017. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And 2 days later after that deposition, you reached back out to law enforcement because you had additional information for them, correct?
No, sir, it was the following day.
It was the following day. Okay,
Correct.
The following day you reached out because of the voice messages.
Correct. I did not have my phone with me when we had our the first deposition, and I didn't know how relevant that these voice messages were.
First time we heard that you had a conversation with Mr. Sievers in which he was defending Curtis Wainwright after his arrest was in September of 2019, correct?
Correct.
The first time you told someone from law enforcement or the state attorney's office that Mr. Sievers wanted the jail to allow computer access was in September of 2019, is that correct?
Correct.
You would agree with me, these are pretty damning statements, correct?
Objection calls for a conclusion on the part of the witness.
Sustained.
Do you think these conversations were important, sir?
Objection calls for speculation on the part of the witness.
Sustained.
There was another way to do that, but next, let's go on to this cross-examination of a detective who gathered evidence.
Is it fair to say that, given all of your training, experience, and education, that you tend to be very conscientious and detail-oriented when collecting evidence?
I do my best, sir.
Okay. But would you have used some type of protective gloves so that your biological material would not transfer onto the items of evidence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you collected these samples, were you doing any type of analysis, or was it your job just merely to collect, package, and send?
Yes, sir.
So I kind of asked you a yes or no question. I'll try that again. Is it fair to say that in the course of this investigation, your job was to collect, package, and send?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Ross asked you about some blue gloves found with coveralls. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Were there any blue gloves found or collected with coveralls to your knowledge?
They were provided by Doe Run as exemplars.
Okay, so the blue gloves were sample gloves, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But there were no blue gloves then that were found?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
Also, there was this cross-examination about evidence recovered from the car the suspects are accused of using to travel to the scene and kill Dr. Sievers.
Did you find any cat or dog hair matching the pets in the rental car?
I didn't do the testing, so you'd have to ask the analyst.
Okay. You said that the DNA evidence from the vehicle, you said it was blood, is that correct?
It was a presumptive test for blood.
Okay, so the blood from the car did not match any of the known samples, is that correct?
That's not what I said.
Okay, what did you say?
The profile wasn't good enough to compare, so there was not enough markers there to compare to people.
Okay, and DNA markers, they call those loci, is that correct?
Yes.
And we didn't have enough loci to confirm whether or not the that blood came from any of those individuals. Is that correct?
I think I would need to read that section of the DNA report if you want exactly what they said about the DNA.
Did you find any evidence from the rental car into the residence?
Not that I'm aware, I do not think so.
Did you find any trace evidence from the residence into the rental car?
Your Honor, I'm going to object as she did not conduct the analysis on what was found in the car, and so this really is outside the scope of her knowledge.
Sustained.
Our panel is back one final time here. So Michael, Joseph, I'll start with you. When you're cross-examining somebody, you got to have a plan and you have to ask the right questions. There were a couple of plans in there somewhere, but they got lost because the attorney is asking for conclusions, trying to get people to testify to things they have no knowledge of. So what's going on?
It feels a little bit like a fishing expedition. When you're on cross-examination, it's supposed to be controlled and tight and objective. Dismantle the other side's strongest points and move on, prove your points and move on.
Yeah, okay, Michael, this is Florida. You can do pre-trial depositions in this state, so why would it be a fishing expedition?
Yeah, this was a deposition, really. You know, deposition, you start like this. When you get to cross, it better be like this, surgical. You better know the answer before you ask the question. Clearly, that was not happening here.
And Joseph, we had the judge earlier on in the case telling the attorneys to knock off the time wasting and keep the trial on track. Has that actually happened? And I asked you a question I know the answer to.
It has not happened. We're not even nowhere close to that happening yet. The judge is not on their side. You want to have the judge on your side. Got to do better.
Okay, Michael, so there were a couple of things in there, a couple of nuggets that the defense did collect to argue during summation. No pet hair from the victim's family home in the rental car. Well, if you're walking around a house and it's got pet hair, then surely one fiber of it will get on something and perhaps wind up in the rental car. You can argue, well, these two are making something up. I mean, where are they trying to go with that?
You know, it seems to me what the defense is hoping is that the prosecution just isn't successful in convincing this jury that Mark Sievers was connected to the crimes. It's almost like they're saying, look, they don't have a case. We're going to just let that lack of evidence unfold in front of us. We don't have to do anything.
Yeah, but people, I think, Joseph, are going to listen to Curtis Wright. He's sitting up there. He's reluctant. He's acting like he feels bad about what he did, and they're going to believe him and say, I went all the way down to Florida to kill this woman because the husband asked me to. And by the way, the husband is a longtime friend.
Right. I agree. The problem here is there is no nexus between anything that the defense is doing. You have to get your theme across, and they haven't done that.
Yeah, that's all the time we have. Thanks a lot to the panelists. We'll see you tomorrow here on The Debrief.